Restoring and colorizing an old historical photo is an art for itself. But as in almost every field, AI can help us. Specifically, Stable Diffusion using ControlNet. If you want an accurately colorized photo, there's almost no way around a ton of manual work and historical research. But nonetheless, today I'm going to show you how to turn a picture like this Civil War nurse into a colorized image like our handsome man over here. You can use AI for this process as much or as little as you like. I think it's an excellent jumping off point, and you can really get some great results if you spend enough time. Without further ado, let me show you how. This video is going to assume that you have some basic knowledge in image editing and already have the automatic 11.11 web UI installed for Stable Diffusion. If you don't, no problem, just follow this guide that I linked in the description on how to install it. You will need an NVIDIA Windows computer and just play around with it a little bit to get the basics of prompting done. The rest I'm going to show you how to install and use. Now, we will be using a different checkpoint than the standard v1.5 or 2.0, namely one called Realistic Vision. What you can do is you can follow the link in the description, go to civitai.com and download Realistic Vision version 2.0. Just click here, it's a safe tensor file, and then place this model in your Stable Diffusion Web UI folder under Models, Stable Diffusion, and just put that in here. Next, you're going to want to install the VAE. Now, it doesn't really matter what that is. You just need one to use it to make some slightly better images than usual. So go down here, click this link, and you're going to download another file. That file you put in the models folder as well under VAE. Just paste that in here, and this is the name. I already have it. Now, to activate this VAE, you go to your UI settings, scroll down to User Interface, Quick Settings List, and write SD_VAE, apply settings, and reload your UI. And after you've done that, you can switch your checkpoint to Realistic Vision, and you see that you have this new menu up here, SDVAE, that you set to the VAE you just downloaded. Now, one more thing, of course, you're going to need the ControlNet extension to get the actual image you want out of this. So for that, you go to Extensions, Install from URL, and paste this URL that I have in the description in here, and hit Install. Once you've done that, go to Install tab, and put a check next to SD Web UI ControlNet. You can also go to the Available tab, load in the extensions, and find it in here and do the same thing. It doesn't make a difference. And after you've hit that check mark, apply and restart UI. Great, now you see down here you will have a ControlNet tab, but you will need to use multiple ControlNet steps. So to do that, you go to Settings, go down here to the ControlNet settings, and set your multi-ControlNet max models amount to 3. And now when you go down here, click ControlNet, you will see you have 3 different tabs for Control Model 0, 1, and 2. So we're going to use all of those. And that way your Stable Diffusion is set up for the process we're going to do today. Now it's time to get our image ready, right? I'm going to be using Affinity Photo 2, but these methods are possible in Photoshop, in GIMP, pretty much any sort of image editing software. I have this Civil War photograph here. This is a Union nurse called O.W. Waite. Now, I only want this guy's portrait up here, so I'm going to crop it with a custom ratio that works well with Stable Diffusion. Of course, you can use any ratio, but I recommend one that's just easy to handle. In my case, 512 by 768. And now we're just going to move on up in here and get this guy cropped like this. So we have his face and parts of his body. Great. Now I'm going to resize the document to the size I want as a final result. And because I'm going to resize by 4, I'm going to do 512 times 2, right? And that's going to automatically resize to 1536.4. I can adjust that to just 1536, right? I don't need that extra comma. Resize, and there we go. It should look exactly the same. Now, before we go into Stable Diffusion, I'm going to clean this up a little bit roughly already using just standard tools like the clone brush tool, for example, to remove some little artifacts like that, just some spots, because later we're going to ask Stable Diffusion to run the Kenny algorithm over it. You don't need to know exactly what that is, but what it basically does is it recognizes outlines in this picture to figure out what's in it, right? And if there are spots like this, that might irritate the algorithm, and we don't want that. So I'm just going to clean it up roughly. Now, historically, if we were doing this really clean, I would figure out if that's actually like a birthmark or something he has on his face. But because it looks like the other spots here, I'm going to remove it. But that sort of attention to detail could be important depending on who you're doing this for. A family member, for example, you might know that kind of thing. Good. There isn't much more. I think that's just part of his beard here. And now I'm going to run some denoising over it in Affinity. That's available here in Filters, Noise, Denoise. And I'm going to just adjust the luminance settings to kind of make it a little smoother. Because it doesn't matter if the details get lost here. We're going to get those in with Canny again, right? So this is basically just removing the noise. Now that's nice. I don't need this in this sepia tone, so I'm also going to run like an HSL adjustment over it, remove all the saturation, and finally add curves and just bring a little bit of contrast back in here. Just a teensy bit to kind of bring back some of that shading that got lost over time and in the original photographic process. Now you'll see we will get some noise returning, so we can just kind of clone tool some new spots that may have appeared there. This can be a rough process, that's okay. And now we're going to save it, export as a PNG, and funnily enough, even though our canvas is really big, we can bring this back down to 512 by 768. It doesn't matter really, because this is going to go into ControlNet. What that does exactly, we'll see in just a second. I'm going to iterate my files. I'm just going to call the first one I export 1. That's a great way to kind of save these. And now we're in Stable Diffusion. So the first thing we're going to do is, before we forget, import our images into ControlNet. So that's this new tab down here that we set up earlier, Control Model 0. We're going to bring in our 1.png, and this will be turned into a depth map. So for that, we hit Enable, Preprocessor Depth, Model Depth. And that's already it. For the second control model, we're going to bring the same image in, Enable, and set the preprocessor to Canny, and the model to Canny as well. Now down here, we are going to change the thresholds. So low threshold, I found a good value is 30, and a high threshold can be 130. That usually ignores some of the extra noise, right, and gets the outline of the person well. Of course, this might be different for the photo you're editing, so make sure you play around with these settings if you're not getting the exact results you want. And for the third control model, we're going to get a pose to really make sure that our guy remains pointing the same direction. We set the preprocessor to open pose and the model to open pose. Same, we don't change any settings. And now up here, scrolling up, we're going to change our sampling method to DPM++ 2M Keras. That, in my experience, is just a really good sampling method for this process. Our sampling steps we can set up to around 30 is good. I'm going to set my batch count to 4, but you set that to however many options you want to get. Sieve G-scale is great. Width and height, we change the height to 768, of course, so we get the same aspect ratio as our input. This is why I wanted the input to have these settings already pretty close to what we want, or exactly to what we're going to enter here. And last but not least, our prompt. Now, before we type anything in here, there's a pretty cool trick. We're going to go to the Image to Image tab and load our image in here. And here we have a button that says Interrogate Clip. And this is going to try to recognize what's in the image and give us a head start for our prompt. So let's click that. Now, funnily enough, this actually goes pretty hard on my GPU, so I do have to stop recording when I do some of these things. But as you can see, it worked. We now have a man in a uniform with a beard and a mustache in a black and white photo with a white background. Good. Now, obviously, we don't want to take the black and white photo thing over from this because we want it in color, but everything else is pretty good. So a man in a uniform with a beard and a mustache, we're going to copy that, bring it into text to image, and start our prompt like this. Now, I'm not going to get into all the historic research, but knowing that he is on the Union side in the Civil War, we can figure out some colors we want, right? So if I look up Civil War uniform Union, you can see most likely this man's uniform is a dark blue with golden buttons. So we can add that to our prompt. Dark blue uniform with a beard and mustache. golden buttons. And now some other things that on Reddit, among others, has worked well for people is starting the prompt with RAW, so raw photo, with a weight of 1.5. Another way you could weight this is actually selecting these words and Control arrow key up to weight this to 1.5. Those are two ways. And what I also like doing is adding healthy skin to really get a good skin color in there. High detail, high quality, and studio lighting. Now, negative prompt is almost more important than the positive prompt. It's pretty long though, so I won't read it out loud. I'm just going to copy it, and you can get it in the video description and copy paste that as well. It just basically makes sure that it looks realistic rather than being a cartoon. Zombie is great to have in your negative prompt when making people because, you know, people look healthy. Zombies look pretty much the opposite of what a person should look like. So that kind of negative prompts it that way. And last but not least, black and white in there, ugly colors, and we don't want them looking sick or pallid. So I kind of add that in there as well. Good. Now we're set up for our first round. You may have noticed that the only input we're giving is in control. So image to image comes later, if you know what that is. That we don't need that in this step. And now it's time to generate. Before we continue, I want to share this video's sponsor with you, Brilliant.org. As creatives, I think it's very important to understand the tools that we use, so I was curious about the technology behind Stable Diffusion. I found the perfect interactive course about artificial neural networks on Brilliant, and was able to learn the fundamentals in just one short interactive lesson per day. You can pick from thousands of professionally made lessons for whatever level you're on. Brilliant has content from basic to advanced math, AI, data science, neural networks, and more, with new lessons coming every month. Brilliant is built for people like me who have a busy day-to-day job and want to learn real problem solving that we can actually apply. So it's a great, low-pressure, fun, and hands-on way to learn. I sincerely recommend it. If you want to understand AI like I'm learning to, or check out anything else Brilliant has to offer for 30 days free, click the link in the description or visit brilliant.org/AlbertBosezon. The first 200 of you who sign up via my link will get 20% off your annual premium subscription, should you choose to subscribe. Now let's get back to restoring that photo. Great, and here are our first results. Before we look at the guy's close-up, I want to show you these three maps it generated. So this is the so-called depth map, where you can see it got the outlines of our guy pretty much perfectly, even if some depth, you know, is missing in his face or details. This is more than enough. This is our canny map. I would probably adjust the threshold, like raise it, like bring them a little closer together to get more detail out of here, but it worked pretty well already. And here is our open pose data. So this one I'm going to just save, and we can bring it in here and just call it open pose, because then we don't have to pre-process again. Same thing with the depth information. We can just reuse that one. And the canny, I think I'm going to check out the guy results first. So here we go. You can see it really colored very well. I mean, the jacket is almost perfect. Our guy looks too different from the original, I think. And again, it's like giving him a side beard. We may have to fix that manually. I'm not entirely sure yet. And here it did something weird to the sleeve. But in general, the results are quite excellent. I'm just going to run it again with a better canny map and adjusting my prompt. So to do that, first I'm going to replace the results we like with open pose, for example. We can remove the preprocessor here. Same thing with depth. Remove the preprocessor, keep everything else. Now for the canny thresholds, like I said, you have to kind of figure out your own numbers here, but for this union nurse, I'm going to go for 40/70. Your aim is to find a good balance between detail in the canny and limiting your model too much. For example, my guy has some lines here that Stable Diffusion seems to mistake for beard growth, and I don't want any beard there. So that's what we're trying to balance. And let's check out the background here. So what is our background actually? That looks like some kind of wood, I suppose, and wallpaper. I don't know if we're going to be able to reconstruct that. We might have to do some inpainting here later. I'm not sure. Let's just put background is wallpaper for now. And instead of the beard, I'm going to do with a goatee, because that's what it is. And try clean shaven cheeks. and see where that takes us. Great, so here's our new canny image, and you can see it did add some more detail. We do have some noise here, but that should be fine. Most importantly, we have the rest of the uniform, so we shouldn't have any more sleeve issues. And the results it made me are pretty good too. They look kind of painterly, but that's our next step, right? So they all look pretty cool, and I think this is my favorite. Now, this is not close to final, right? So what we can do is right-click copy this, and bring it into Affinity or our editing program and paste it. It's going to be too small, but that's okay because we are only using this for color information. After all, it's still not perfectly close to our original guy. So for that, we're going to change our blending mode to color. It's going to look worse, of course, just at first, right? But what we basically got is we've colored in this original image, and now we can go to our original image and lower the opacity just a little bit to create kind of a nice little mix between our dudes here. And if we want, we can already adjust the face, which is going to go further and further off from our original if we want to. And for that in Affinity, I'm going to go to the liquify persona. In Photoshop, it's also called liquify. It's just an effect. So we're going to make sure our layer is rasterized. And then we're going to click liquify persona. Now in Affinity, we have this little tool here where we can just kind of push around elements of the face. So I'm going to bring my eyes over a little bit. Basically what I saw as a difference between our new guy and the old guy. I'm kind of click between them and see, you know, his eyelids are a little lower and so forth. That's what I'm trying to fix here. But don't be too detailed here, right? And once you have something you like, you can also adjust the curves a little bit. So this is already closer to what you want as an end result. So make sure your lighting is here how you want it, you know, your contrast, etc. For example, I also kind of want to desaturate this a little bit. Just a teensy bit. Excellent, now we can save this as number 2. And again, make the size small. And now, the one we liked, we can click the Send to Image button. And it's going to bring all of our settings over here. Now we don't want to use this image, of course. We want to remove that and bring our number 2 in here, but the button still made sense to bring all the features over, all the settings. Now, make sure you set your sampling method back to dpm++ 2m caris. Sampling steps, everything else should be just fine. And our denoising strength we're going to bring down a little bit, of course, because we don't want to change the colors and stuff here too much. This is just going to be basically optimizing this result over here, removing some of the noise, etc. Now with ControlNet, we can bring in our depth again. No preprocessor depth. We can go back to text and save our new canny image here. Bring it in. And because we're changing so little, we don't really need to use the open pose anymore. I think it understood what we want. And now we're just going to produce another version. And as you can see, it kind of just cleaned up our image a little bit. It removed some of the weird grains and stuff. We just have some new dudes here. Now, of course, you may notice the face has changed again, and that's what we're changing. We're fixing in our next step. We're going to send this image, the one we like, to extras. And here we're going to resize this by 2 with the upscaler RESArgan 4x+. And now we can just click here, copy image, and paste it in here. And immediately we'll have our new guy in here. Now, how do we get the face back though, right? Well, we're going to mask quite simply. We are going to create a mask on this layer and slowly but surely paint our original guy's face back in. Now, that's why I like Affinity, because it has this nice little masking preview that Photoshop doesn't. So we're going to especially take care of the eyes here, because those are really easily recognizable. Our mouth survived pretty well. The nose is a bit different. So we're going to get the eyes and the nose back. Now he looks a little sick because it's a little redder, but that's easy to fix. We just need to put another curves adjustment onto our color and just go through the different channels and try to adjust the color down, right? So there's a little less red. Good. And our guy has his face back. It's that easy. So now we export this version, and this time we keep it at the full resolution. So export 3. We go back to image, bring our 3 in here, and hit Inpaint. Now after a couple seconds, you will get this brush here. And with that brush, you are going to select the facial area that you want to adjust and give it a little bit of a margin, right? Just make sure it has enough room around the features you want to change, like that. And now down here, you will see these settings. You need to set the Inpaint area to only masked, so it uses the full generating resolution on just the area you want to edit. That's very important. And width and height, it's kind of square shaped, so I'm going to go 512 by 512 for this area. And keep all the other settings. Denoising strength is okay, and everything else down here too. And now we're going to hit generate. The results are done, and here we go. We have a couple different options, all of them very handsome. This model makes people very handsome. So they all kind of have more of a smolder than he does. This one looks closest to him, I think. The beard is very similar. He has kind of the same nose shape. I think this is actually the closest. So I'm going to bring him over here, copy him, and paste him on top of all the other images here. It's kind of lost a little bit of color, but now we're entering the final stages, right? So we're very close to the original. We can duplicate our original and bring it up on top just for, comparison purposes, and also copy any curves adjustments we may have made. We can go back to liquify and just bring them together a little more. So here's where we kind of enter our manual editing phase. Now you can also mask it a little bit, right? So if we do have some areas that we want more fine-tuned, like for example, where his eye is meeting. And what's also helpful if you're editing really individual channels, RGB, you can also just remove, like unshow the other channels and adjust, right? If you go to composite green, for example, and change this to green, you can easily see any differences in shading and more easily adjust the colors. In blue. Great, now this is as far as I'm willing to take it, but obviously you can edit as much manually as you want after this, go through more inpainting iterations, so there's a lot that can be done to bring these two closer together. I mean, obviously there's still a little bit of difference between their faces, but you saw the tools that you could use to bring these closer together. If it's, for example, a loved one that you actually know what they looked like, you have more reference pictures, you can spend as much time as you like on it. But I think this is nonetheless an excellent method to really accelerate the process of colorizing or restoring images, and is great in any workflow, whether you're a professional restorer or colorizer, or just doing it for fun as a cool gift for somebody. So definitely worth a shot, and a lot of fun to find these old pictures and make them pop like this. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did and learned something. If you did, feel free to leave a subscription and a like to help me continue this channel. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below, and I try to answer as many of them as I possibly can. And again, make sure to check out today's sponsor, Brilliant.org, for thousands of courses for math, computer science, and much more. And as always, I hope to see you next time. I'm Albert, and I hope you have fun with Stable Diffusion and ControlNet.